In Islamic belief, the Kiraman Katibin, meaning noble scribes, are two angels assigned to every human being to record their deeds, both good and bad. This concept is directly mentioned in the Quran, especially in verses like, when the two receivers receive him, seated on the right and on the left, he does not utter a word except that with him is an observer prepared to record. But verily, over you are appointed angels to watch you, honorable recording. They know all that you do. One angel sits on the right shoulder and records good deeds, while the other sits on the left and records bad deeds. These angels are not named in the Quran, but the Hadith literature refers to them using the titles Kiraman Katibin. They are never seen or heard, but are constantly present, silently writing down every action, intention, and word, even the ones whispered in secret. Their role is not to judge or influence human behavior. They do not interfere, advise, or punish. Their sole responsibility is documentation. On the day of judgment, al-Qiyamah, these records will be presented as part of the final divine reckoning. A person's deeds will be weighed, and these written records will serve as undeniable evidence of how one lived. This concept reinforces the Islamic emphasis on personal accountability. Even if no one else witnesses an act, the Kiraman Katibin do, and that knowledge can be a powerful moral compass. Their presence is a constant spiritual reminder. Nothing is ever lost, overlooked, or forgotten in God's justice. Though they remain unseen and silent, their task is sacred. They are honored as trustworthy servants of Allah, upholding the divine system of truth and justice. In this sense, the Kiraman Katibin are not just passive scribes, they are a living symbol of God's omniscience and fairness. In Islamic belief, the Muaqibat al-Muraqibat are a group of angels mentioned in the Quran, specifically in Surah Ar-Ra'd 13:11, where it states, "For each person there are successive angels before and behind, protecting them by Allah's command." This verse refers to the angels who take turns. The word mu'aqib implies alternating or following one after another, guarding each individual. These angels are commonly understood to be part of the group known as the Hafaza, al-Hafza, or the guardians. According to classical Islamic teachings found in tafsir literature, like those of al-Tabari and Ibn Kathir, and authentic hadith, each human being is assigned 4 Hafaza angels, 2 angels by day and 2 by night. They take shifts watching over a person's body, health, and surroundings, guarding them from harm, jinn, black magic, and unseen dangers, but only by Allah's will. Their protection is not independent. These angels do not act on their own power, but only carry out the divine command. They cannot alter fate or stop death, but they block misfortunes unless Allah decrees otherwise. Their role is to preserve, not to intervene heroically, but to faithfully execute God's protective care. Additionally, in some traditions, these same angels are said to record one's deeds, though this function overlaps with the Kiraman Katibin, the noble recording angels. Whether recording or protecting, the constant angelic presence reminds Muslims that they are never alone. Divine surveillance and mercy are always near. While the Mu'aqibat are never vividly described in form, their work is felt in everyday life. Believers surviving accidents, escaping unseen dangers, or feeling an unexplainable sense of safety often give thanks to Allah, believing it was by His will through these unseen protectors. In essence, the Mu'aqibat, Hafaza angels represent God's personal care over each soul, vigilant, tireless, and utterly obedient, ensuring that no harm reaches His servants without His knowledge and decree. In Jewish tradition, Ishim, from the Hebrew ish, meaning man, are the most human-like of all angels. They are considered the lowest rank in the angelic hierarchy, yet they hold a sacred role. The medieval Jewish philosopher Maimonides, in Mishnah Torah, described them as the type of angel that can actually be grasped by the human mind. Unlike the higher, more abstract orders such as Seraphim or Ophanim, they're called Ishim because they appear in the form of men when they interact with humans. The Ishim are messengers and intermediaries between God and people. According to rabbinic tradition, they are the angels who speak with prophets and appear in visions, helping transmit divine will. The Midrash and many commentators explain that whenever someone in the Tanakh, Hebrew Bible, encounters a man who turns out to be an angel, like the 3 visitors to Abraham in Genesis 18, or the mysterious figure who wrestled Jacob in Genesis 32, they are likely encountering Ishim. Even though they are the lowest among the angels, Ishim are still entirely spiritual beings and immensely powerful compared to humans. However, they only act under direct command from God. In Kabbalistic thought, particularly in the writings of the Zohar, there is a belief that righteous people may ascend in spiritual status and become like Ishim in the heavenly realms, bridging the gap between flesh and spirit. They are seen as gentle, merciful beings who help build God's kingdom not with fire or wrath, but by inspiring people and guiding them subtly. They appear in dreams, in visions, or in moments of divine insight. In many ways, they represent the divine reaching out to us in ways we can understand. Man to man, soul to soul. In Christianity, the phrase sons of God is used more broadly. In the New Testament, it can refer to righteous people, those who are adopted into God's family through faith. It also refers to Jesus Christ as the unique Son of God. However, many Christian traditions acknowledge that the phrase echoes its earlier use in the Hebrew Scriptures as referring to angels. For example, in some Catholic catechisms and theological writings, sons of God is used as a poetic term for angels, especially those who remain loyal to God. The Bene Elohim in both traditions are seen as loyal spiritual beings who reflect God's majesty and power. In some interpretations, they are said to be led by Archangel Michael, the warrior prince mentioned in Daniel 12 verse 1, who defends God's people in times of cosmic conflict. As a collective, they act as heavenly ministers, praisers of God's glory, and agents of divine protection. Their strength lies not in might alone, but in their faithful obedience and radiant holiness, making them true sons who mirror the divine. In Jewish mysticism, particularly in the apocalyptic text, known as 3 Enoch, also called the Hebrew Book of Enoch, dated between the 5th-6th centuries CE, the song-uttering choirs are described as a vast collective of angels whose sole purpose is to sing eternal praises to God. These choirs are not a single angelic rank, but a union of multiple heavenly hosts, troops, captains, messengers, mighty ones, and more, who are all united in sacred liturgy. They reside in the 5th heaven, called Makon, where they are said to sing the Trisagion, the threefold cry of Holy, Holy, Holy is the Lord of hosts at the appointed times. This act is not optional. 3 Enoch warns that if any angel fails to sing at the exact moment required, they are consumed by divine fire, a sign of the absolute seriousness and sanctity of their task. Their choir is conducted by Tegas, the angel of music, who ensures that each group enters the praise in perfect order and harmony. Their continuous, structured worship is not just ceremonial, it is cosmic. The mystical tradition teaches that the balance and rhythm of creation itself depend on this unceasing praise. These angels are not warriors or judges. Their power is spiritual, and their purpose is devotion. They show that the highest angelic calling is not power or action, but glorifying the Creator. While the song-uttering choirs do not appear in the Tanakh Hebrew Bible, they are prominent in Merkava mysticism, Midrashic commentary, and early Kabbalistic thought, emphasizing the centrality of divine praise in the spiritual hierarchy. Through them, Jewish mystics envisioned a heavenly realm where worship is so sacred that even angels risk annihilation if they falter. The concept of fallen angels, celestial beings who disobey God and are cast out, appears in different forms across Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, though with key differences in interpretation and theology. In Judaism, particularly in Second Temple literature, like the Book of Enoch, considered apocryphal and not part of the Hebrew Bible, a group of angels called the Watchers, Grigori, descended to earth and sinned by taking human wives. This union produced the Nephilim, a race of giants, and introduced forbidden knowledge like sorcery and warfare to humanity. These angels were punished by being bound in the earth, awaiting final judgment. While not part of mainstream Jewish doctrine today, these texts heavily influenced later Christian ideas of rebellion in heaven. In Christianity, the most well-known story of a fallen angel is that of Lucifer, traditionally interpreted from passages like Isaiah 14, allegorically, and especially Revelation 12, verse 7 to 9, which describes a war in heaven where Satan and his angels are defeated by Michael and cast down to earth. These angels became demons, spiritual beings that now oppose God and tempt humans. Though not all details are in the canonical Bible, early Christian theology, especially church fathers like Origen and Augustine, solidified the idea of a rebellion in heaven led by prideful angels. In Islam, the Quran explicitly states that angels do not disobey God, Quran 66:6, which excludes the possibility of fallen angels in the Christian or Enochic sense. However, the Quran introduces Iblis, who refused to bow to Adam when commanded by God, Quran 7:11-18. Although he was among the heavenly assembly, the Quran identifies him as a jinn, not an angel, Quran 18:50. Islamic theology distinguishes between angels, created from light and always obedient, and jinn, created from smokeless fire, capable of both good and evil. Still, later Islamic literature and some early tafsir, commentaries, discuss stories of rebellious spirits and even angelic-like figures who failed in their duties, often allegorized rather than literal. Across these three traditions, the idea of a celestial being falling from grace is a powerful metaphor. In Judaism, the Watchers represent the danger of crossing divine boundaries. In Christianity, Lucifer embodies pride and rebellion. In Islam, Iblis shows how arrogance leads to eternal damnation. Though not all traditions agree on the mechanics, all share the warning. Even those closest to divine light can fall if they choose disobedience. In Christian angelology, principalities, from the Latin principatus, are powerful angels tasked with overseeing entire nations, rulers, and institutions. Principalities are said to govern earthly realms under divine authority, making sure that governments, communities, and even major religious institutions align with God's will. Their role is not hands-on combat like archangels or seraphim. Instead, they function like heavenly administrators. They supervise other angels, guide nations, and influence major institutions behind the scenes. Think of them as divine strategists. They oversee the spiritual direction of a country or civilization and may pass orders down to archangels or guardian angels to implement. A biblical glimpse of this concept appears in Daniel 10:13, which speaks of the Prince of Persia resisting an angelic messenger, interpreted by many Christian theologians as a reference to a principality assigned to the Persian Empire. In Jewish mysticism, while the term principality isn't used directly, similar ideas exist. Ancient Jewish texts like the Book of Enoch and mystical writings such as the Zohar describe angelic rulers over nations, often called Seraphim, meaning princes. For example, in Daniel 10, Michael is described as the Prince of Israel, showing that each nation may have a celestial representative. In Christian angelology, the powers, sometimes referred to as authorities, are one of the 9 choirs of angels described in classical theological systems, especially within the Catholic tradition. Powers are typically ranked 6th in the celestial hierarchy, following the virtues and preceding the principalities. Their main role is to maintain divine order in the cosmos. According to theologians like Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, 5th, 6th century CE, powers are responsible for restraining demonic forces, overseeing the distribution of power among angels and nations, and ensuring spiritual balance. They are often portrayed as warrior angels, clad in celestial armor, upholding God's justice and guarding the boundaries between the heavenly and earthly realms. Some traditions identify Archangel Chemael or Samael, depending on the source, as a leader or representative of this choir, though these attributions vary across texts and interpretations. The term authorities, as used in Ephesians 6:12, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world," has been interpreted by some early church fathers and angelologists to refer to these angelic beings, though scholars also debate whether this verse refers to fallen angels or heavenly ones. Regardless, powers are viewed as those who execute God's authority, particularly in matters of cosmic warfare and the restraint of evil. In Jewish tradition, the destroying angels, known as Malach HaMashchit, are divine executioners who carry out God's harshest judgments. These beings are not rogue or evil. They act strictly under divine command. They appear in key moments in the Hebrew Bible, such as the slaying of the Egyptian firstborn during the final plague in Exodus, and the annihilation of 185,000 Assyrian soldiers in a single night, as described in the Book of Kings. Known collectively as Memetim, meaning those who bring death, these angels are feared for their power, but respected as agents of divine justice. Once a heavenly decree is sealed, they are unleashed to carry it out with terrifying precision. The Memetim are deeply tied to the angel of death, Malach HaMavet, who is often portrayed as their leader or commanding force. While their forms are not always described in detail, Jewish mystical texts suggest they may appear as shadowy or overwhelming presences, embodiments of divine wrath rather than physical beings. They are not agents of chaos. They serve order, acting only when God's mercy has given way to final judgment. Rabbinic teachings stress that as long as one lives, there is a chance to repent, but once the verdict is delivered, the Memetim strike without hesitation, fulfilling their role in the cosmic balance of mercy and justice. Abaddon also emerges in this context, though in a more complex way. In the Hebrew Bible, Abaddon is not a being but a place, often paired with Sheol to describe the realm of death and total destruction. However, in later Jewish mysticism, Abaddon becomes more than just a destination. It is envisioned as a realm ruled by forces of annihilation, and sometimes even personified as a spiritual power. Though not explicitly named among the Memetim, Abaddon is often linked to the same divine forces of judgment and death. In Christian texts like the Book of Revelation, Abaddon evolves into the Angel of the Abyss, commanding legions of destroyers, an image influenced by Jewish themes, but developed further in apocalyptic Christianity. Thus, while not originally a destroying angel himself, Abaddon's identity sits at the threshold between place, force, and personified destruction within the broader world of divine executioners. In Christian theology, especially within Catholic tradition, the virtues are a class of angels that belong to the second sphere of the angelic hierarchy, alongside the dominions and powers. This classification comes from the writings of Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, a Christian mystic from the 5th-6th century whose works heavily influenced medieval theology. Though the Bible does not name the virtues directly, theologians interpret their role through passages that describe angels controlling elements of nature. For example, Psalm 104:4 says, "He makes his angels winds, his ministers a flaming fire." Based on these interpretations, the virtues are understood to guide the natural world and channel God's divine will into the functioning of the universe, including the regulation of the seasons, the movement of celestial bodies, and the occurrence of miracles. The virtues are not warriors like the powers, nor are they governors like the dominions. Instead, they are believed to be the invisible agents through whom God's grace flows into the physical world. Theologians such as Thomas Aquinas taught that the virtues are responsible for ensuring the harmony of creation, making possible the operation of natural laws and occasional divine interventions. Their influence is subtle but profound, working not through force, but through the constant and quiet sustaining of the cosmos. In Christian tradition, miracles that do not defy, but rather elevate the natural order, such as healing or divine signs in nature, are often attributed to the work of the virtues, who act as faithful intermediaries between God's command and the material world. In Judaism, there is no specific angelic order known as virtues. However, Jewish texts, especially in mystical traditions like Kabbalah, do include angels who oversee aspects of creation. Angels such as Metatron or Raphael are sometimes associated with divine energy, healing, or light. Though these roles differ from the structured choirs found in Christian angelology, mainstream Jewish belief does not categorize angels into hierarchies like the Christian 9 choirs, but it does acknowledge that angels can carry out divine will in the world. While there are similarities in the idea of angels acting as channels for God's power, the concept of the virtues as a specific class of nature-guiding angels remains unique to Christian theology. In the book of Ezekiel, the prophet describes a breathtaking vision of God's chariot. flames, wheels within wheels, and radiant beings. Among these details appears the Hebrew word Hashmal, Ezekiel 1:4-127, often translated as amber or glowing electrum. At this stage, Hashmal does not refer to an angel or being, but rather to the brilliant, fiery light surrounding the divine presence. It's a visual description, a mysterious, radiant substance like molten metal glowing with intense, intelligent energy. The imagery struck later scholars and mystics deeply, becoming the foundation for a fascinating development in Jewish thought. In post-biblical Jewish mysticism, especially in the early Merkava, chariot traditions, and in Maimonides' philosophical writings, the term Hashmallim evolved into the name of a specific angelic order. Maimonides, in Mishnah Torah, lists 10 ranks of angels, placing the Hashmallim fourth, beneath the Chayot, Ophanim, and Erelim. These angels are imagined as brilliant, powerful beings who stand near God's throne and serve as divine intermediaries. Their role is to relay the will of God from the highest realms to lower orders, governing the chain of celestial command. Though Scripture never calls them angels by name, centuries of interpretation transformed the glowing vision of Ezekiel into a majestic order of radiant messengers, said to glow like molten amber and embody divine wisdom and order. The Erelim are a powerful class of angels in Jewish tradition, often translated as valiant ones or heroes. The name appears in the Hebrew Bible in Isaiah 33:7, where it says, "Behold, their valiant ones cry without, the ambassadors of peace weep bitterly." While the verse refers to human warriors, later Jewish mysticism reinterpreted Erelim as a distinct angelic order associated with war, judgment, and national crisis. In post-biblical and mystical Jewish writings, especially in Kabbalistic and Merkava, chariot mysticism, the Erelim are depicted as celestial warriors. They are not mentioned extensively in canonical scripture, but they rise to prominence in medieval angelologies. Depending on the source, they are ranked differently. First in the Beret Menucha, second in the Zohar, and third by Maimonides in his classification of angelic beings. These variations show how different streams of Jewish thought understood their role, sometimes as leaders, sometimes as frontline soldiers in the heavenly host. Erelim are most often invoked in moments of national tragedy, war, or death, symbolizing divine intervention through might. Rabbinic and mystical sources suggest that the Erelim take action when God's judgment must be carried out on a large scale. For example, Jewish legend links them to the destruction of the Assyrian army in 2 Kings 19 verse 35, where a single angel strikes down 185,000 troops, though the specific term Erelim isn't used in that passage. Later commentators associate this angel with them due to their known function. In mystical literature, Erelim are sometimes imagined bearing swords or banners, leading divine forces into battle. They reflect the militant aspect of God's justice, not as chaotic or violent beings, but as disciplined enforcers of divine will. Their appearance is rare and usually signals a turning point in history, the outbreak of judgment, or the defense of Israel against overwhelming odds. In essence, the Erelim are the embodiment of heavenly valor, majestic and fearsome angels who serve not only as God's warriors, but as a warning of what happens when moral or spiritual collapse demands divine response. In Christian angelology, dominions, also known as dominations in Latin or Kyrios in Greek, belong to the second triad of the 9 choirs of angels, a hierarchy first detailed by the 6th century Christian mystic Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite. These angels serve a unique role. They do not interact directly with humanity, nor do they engage in battles like some other orders. Instead, dominions govern the angelic realm itself. They receive divine will from the higher orders, like the Seraphim and Cherubim, and pass it down to the lower angels. Their function is one of quiet authority, ensuring that God's cosmic order and purpose are carried out efficiently throughout creation. Though the Bible does not describe them in detail, the term dominions appears in the New Testament, specifically in Paul's epistles, such as Colossians 1:16, where Christ is said to have created thrones or dominions, or rulers or authorities. This phrase is often interpreted by early Christian theologians as referring to distinct angelic orders. Dominions are thus seen as administrators of the divine will, overseeing the functioning of other angelic beings without seeking recognition or praise. They are often symbolized in Christian art with orbs or scepters, not because of direct biblical description, but to represent their authority in executing God's will. In Judaism, there is no exact equivalent to the dominions, as the angelic hierarchy is structured differently. However, parallels can be drawn with the Hashmallim, a mysterious, radiant being described in the Book of Ezekiel 1:4-5:27, standing near the divine throne. These fiery entities are interpreted by later Jewish mystics as powerful, silent agents of divine order, much like dominions in Christian thought. Additionally, in Kabbalistic tradition, certain angels are associated with the Sephiroth, emanations of divine attributes such as mercy or judgment, though this system is separate from the Christian choir structure. Still, both traditions acknowledge a class of heavenly beings who do not fight, deliver messages, or appear before humans, but who ensure that the universe continues to operate in alignment with the divine will. Cherubim, known in Hebrew as Cherubim, are powerful angelic beings who appear in the earliest pages of the Hebrew Bible. In the book of Genesis, after Adam and Eve are cast out of Eden, God places cherubim at the east of the garden, along with a flaming sword, to guard the way to the tree of life. This makes them the first divine guardians in Abrahamic scripture, stationed not to destroy, but to protect what is sacred. In Exodus, God commands that 2 golden cherubim be placed atop the Ark of the Covenant, their wings stretched out over the mercy seat, marking the very place where God's presence would dwell. In Jewish theology and mystical writings, cherubim are ranked among the highest angels, just beneath the Seraphim, known for their closeness to the divine presence and their role as throne bearers in prophetic visions. In Christian tradition, cherubim continue to hold a high rank, second among the 9 angelic orders. Their form, drawn from the prophet Ezekiel's visions, is striking and symbolic. 4 faces, of a human, a lion, an ox, and an eagle, representing the fullness of creation, and 4 wings, often described as being full of eyes, indicating divine awareness and wisdom. In the Book of Revelation, similar heavenly creatures surround God's throne, continuously worshiping him. Church theologians like Thomas Aquinas describe the cherubim as angels of profound knowledge, contemplatives who behold the glory of God and reflect his perfect understanding, not in essence, but in purpose. Though often confused in art with winged infants, the biblical cherubim are majestic, complex beings, awe-inspiring symbols of power, order, and divine mystery. The Hamalat al-Arsh, or bearers of the throne, are among the mightiest and most honored angels in Islam. Their existence is mentioned in the Quran, where it says that on the day of judgment, 8 angels will bear the throne of your Lord above them, Surah Al-Haqqa 69:17. These angels are not messengers, nor are they involved in earthly affairs. Instead, their entire purpose is to carry the divine throne, Arsh, and glorify Allah continuously. Another verse in the Quran, Surah Ghafir 40:7, highlights their spiritual role, saying they exalt Allah, believe in him, and pray for the forgiveness of the believers. They represent perfect obedience, utter humility, and eternal worship, existing only to honor the magnificence of Allah's dominion over all creation. Islamic tradition does not describe their exact appearance, and the Quran and authentic hadith remain silent on detailed imagery. Some later Islamic scholars, drawing from interpretative tafsir or weak narrations, describe these angels as vast beings, so massive that the distance between their shoulders could take centuries to cross. Other symbolic interpretations, such as them reflecting divine attributes like mercy or power, or bearing forms similar to animals like lions or eagles, are not found in core Islamic texts and often reflect outside influences or metaphorical descriptions. These should be understood as spiritual metaphors used to express their majesty, not literal depictions. What remains firmly established is their elevated status and purity of function. They bear the greatest created object, the Arsh of Allah, beyond the heavens. By carrying the throne, the Hamalat al-Arsh are seen not as beings of pride or cosmic authority, but as servants whose very honor lies in serving Allah without question or interruption. The Ophanim, from Hebrew ophan, meaning wheel, are mysterious angelic beings described in the Book of Ezekiel, where the prophet envisions a divine chariot, Merkabah, supported by strange, fiery wheels. These wheels aren't ordinary. They shine like beryl, move in any direction without turning, and are covered with countless eyes. In Ezekiel 1:15-21 and 10:9-17, the Ophanim accompany the four living creatures, Chayot, synchronizing their movements perfectly as part of the celestial vehicle that carries the glory of God. These aren't mere machinery. They are alive, intelligent, and full of divine purpose. In Jewish tradition, especially within Merkabah mysticism and Kabbalah, the Ophanim are regarded as a high rank of angels who encircle and guard God's throne. They are sometimes placed just below the Chayot Hakodesh, the holy living creatures, and serve as instruments of divine order and cosmic stability. Their many eyes symbolize God's omniscience. They see all things, and their constant motion reflects the never-ending praise and obedience to God's will. They do not sleep, and their presence is closely tied to God's own glory. In Christian angelology, particularly from the time of Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, the Ophanim are commonly identified with the thrones, one of the highest angelic orders in the celestial hierarchy. As thrones, they serve as the foundation of God's seat, embodying divine justice and executing God's judgments throughout creation. In this tradition, they are not just wheels, but exalted beings of immense power who help mediate God's authority into the material and spiritual realms. In both faiths, the Ophanim symbolize movement, awareness, and the structure of heaven itself. They are cosmic regulators, literal wheels of God's chariot, and metaphorical engines of divine will, always turning, always seeing, always upholding the divine order of the universe. The Seraphim, literally meaning the burning ones in Hebrew, are among the most mysterious and exalted beings in all of Abrahamic tradition. Their most iconic appearance is in the Book of Isaiah, where the prophet witnesses them in a vision standing above God's throne. Each seraph has 6 wings, 2 covering the face in reverence, 2 covering the feet in humility, and 2 used for flight in divine service. They continually cry out, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." Their name and form suggest beings so aflame with divine presence that they radiate pure holiness, consumed by their love for God. In this same vision, one seraph uses a burning coal from the altar to purify Isaiah's lips, symbolizing their role as agents of spiritual cleansing and preparation for prophecy. In Christian theology, especially from the writings of Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, the Seraphim are placed at the very top of the angelic hierarchy, above cherubim and thrones, representing the highest order of celestial beings. They are not messengers like Gabriel, nor warriors like Michael, but exist entirely to glorify God. Medieval theologians such as Thomas Aquinas taught that the Seraphim are so close to the divine essence that they themselves become radiant with its fire, illuminating lower angels and burning with an intensity that no lesser being can endure. Their presence near the throne is not just symbolic, it is central to their identity. They embody divine love in its purest, most consuming form. Chayot Hakodesh, meaning holy living creatures, are among the highest and most mysterious angelic beings in Jewish tradition, particularly in biblical prophecy and mystical literature. They are most famously described in the Book of Ezekiel, where the prophet sees them in a vision of the Merkavah, the divine chariot that carries God's throne. In Ezekiel 1 and 10, each chaya, singular of Chayot, has 4 faces: human, lion, ox, eagle, 4 wings, and is surrounded by flashing fire and lightning. These creatures are not mere symbols. They are described as living, sentient beings that are intimately connected to the manifestation of God's presence in the world. In the writings of Maimonides, Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, the Chayot Hakodesh are placed at the top of his 10-rank angelic hierarchy, indicating their supreme status among celestial beings. While the Hebrew Bible itself does not formally list angelic ranks, later Jewish philosophers and Kabbalists built on biblical visions to categorize angels, and the Chayot were consistently seen as closest to the divine throne, Kisei HaKavod. They are not just guardians or messengers. The Chayot represent the active forces that sustain creation. According to mystical works such as the Zohar and Reshit Chochmah, the Chai support the divine throne, uphold the cosmic structure of the heavens, and continuously sing praises to God with the famous cry, Kadosh, 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 holy, holy, holy. A line echoed in the Kedusha prayer of Jewish liturgy. These beings radiate intense light and fire, which in some sources is so overwhelming that even other angels cannot approach them. In Kabbalistic tradition, especially in Merkava mysticism, the Chayot are sometimes seen as being directed or led by Metatron, the highest of the angels, and the so-called Chancellor of Heaven. The Ophanim, angelic wheels covered in eyes, are often seen beside or beneath the Chayot, forming part of the same vision and assisting in the movement of the divine chariot. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.